Alright guys, how are you guys doing? And welcome to another Loom video. Now, this video, I'm going to talk about discovering design patterns. Probably one of the most important things that you need to do when you're sort of getting started in product design, and you need to understand how apps specifically are designed. And I would suggest watch this video entirely, completely from the beginning to the end. Maybe watch it 2-3 times if you want a little bit more clarity, but I think this would be one of the most important videos for you guys to watch and understand a lot of things. Basically, you need to discover these design patterns and then reverse engineer the logic for why these design patterns would have been used. There could have been multiple ways of designing a particular screen or an element, but why is this, right? And there are certain questions that you can ask yourself to sort of help you get an answer. And we're going to cover the whole thing in this video. Not sure how long it's going to be, but let's sort of get started. Now, for your assignment, you've got to do a lot of flows, multiple flows. You have to design, such as checkout and search and login and browsing and all that stuff, whatever. Now, I'm going to take two examples and sort of give you an idea of how you can do competitive analysis and discover all these design patterns and paradigms that exist today. And how do you analyze which is the pattern that you should apply for your app or your design or your problem statement or your use case? Okay. Now let's talk about onboarding. Everybody knows onboarding is basically a bunch of screens where you educate the user about what the app is for. It gives you like a brief intro into what you can expect in the app, what features that the app offer. It's pretty much similar to a trailer of a movie. Now here I've just got these 3 screens, and pretty much these are how a beginner would design onboarding screens. Like, this is sort of like the template that you find on a lot of platforms on Dribbble and stuff. And that's not the only way to design something, right? So these are just 3 different iterations, and it just doesn't look good or great, or there's a lot more things that you can do, right? But as a beginner, you don't know what are the various ways you can do it. So how do you actually go about figuring out what are the different ways about doing it, and then choosing which one suits your need, right? And I'm going to sort of give you an example. So what you ideally first have to do is go and grab a bunch of screenshots, as I've done over here, right? I've gathered a bunch of screenshots from where, and I've done a lot of things, and I'm going to go into detail and explain what is it that I've done and why have I done something, right? You want to go to places like Mobbin or UI sources and grab these screenshots. Now, how do you even pick these screenshots, right? So let's go to Mobbin. So I'm in Mobbin over here. You can use UI sources as well, but I'm using Mobbin for the purpose of this video. And I'm in the walkthrough section. Now it's going to show all the screens, which are sort of like the onboarding screens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start scanning these and start looking for patterns that are different, right? So for example, this one, okay, I'm just going to pick this one, which, has a bunch of features in one single screen. Then I'm going to pick a couple of these, which have this is like in a model sheet, and then the button looks different. Now you can gather inspiration for UI and content and UX, right? What elements should you have on the screen? How should these elements look? And what is the order of these elements, right? So go ahead and just, keep browsing. Take as many apps as you can, 10 to 15 to 20 apps, does not really matter. Because over a period of time, you will see patterns starting to repeat, and I will prove that to you, right? Here, there's no button, but then there's some text, and then there's some pagination, and then there's a small button over here. And here you're using mockup. All of these look different. So try to get as many different looking screens and try to find patterns. Now, I've already done that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and sort of explain how you need to figure out what the pattern is, right? So this is Unsplash's login screen, right? And basically Unsplash is not using any illustration or any sort of other, graphics. Now Unsplash is a very simple app. There's already a purpose that exists, which is to browse photos, which you can download or you can save or you can upload, right? That's pretty much it. There's not a lot of rocket science or too many features in Unsplash. So it doesn't really ideally make sense to have 3 to 4 multiple screens. Instead, they've just gone ahead, taken one screen, put all the features, and then they've had a single CTA that says start browsing. So I've gone ahead and noted down these points or these points or characteristics. So they're using images. It's one single screen. They've got a main CTA. They don't have a skip button, which usually a lot of onboarding flows have. It's not a modal sheet, right? This is the first screen that the user sees, and then there's no logo for branding, right? This is what they have done. Now, whether you want to implement this style or not will depend on your app, depend on the needs, and depend upon whether it makes sense to design something like this for your users. So before you make a judgment on whether this is right or wrong, do a comparative analysis of all the other apps. Now, I've done comparative analysis of so many apps. Maybe you find it makes sense to do it for the first time, or maybe it makes sense to do it the second time, but you don't really have to do this all the time. If you do it right the first time or the second time, you don't really have to break your head and do all this big process. Every time you start, you have to design an onboarding screen, right? Let's go to the next one. Okay, here. So here they're using illustrations rather than images. It's split into multiple screens. They've got 3 screens over here. They've got a main CTA, and pay attention to the copy. The copy says next, and in the end it says get started. It doesn't say login, it doesn't say sign up, right? Now, I don't know the entire user flow of this app, right? If you really want to know why they have used a modal sheet and they've not used login and sign up, you might have to download this app and check out how the user flow is. The user flow of your app might be very different from the user flow of this app, right? And then they've got a skip button over here. Okay, and then this is a modal sheet. It's not like a flat screen like this, it's a modal, and then they haven't used any logo again. Now, why would you want to have a skip button, right? Now, let's talk about skip button a little bit later, right? But I'm going to come over here. So, illustrations, okay? They've used illustrations, multiple screens again. This time, there's a text link. There's not really a button, right? And then there's no skip, there's no modal, and there's no logo. There's no skip button here, but then they had a skip button here. Now, why? Now, the thing is, you might never know the real answer to it, right? Now, if you feel the app is so straightforward that people don't really have to check out what the features are and they're used to it, maybe you can just have a skip button to skip it because people are aware how the app works, right? Now, I'm not sure what this app is. Let's quickly go check which app this is. And this is called Time Tree, which I guess is I think sort of like a journaling app. I'm guessing, yeah, it's a productivity app, right? So people pretty much are aware of how productivity apps work. And actually, if you see over here, they've used a modal sheet, because it makes sense. So their entire sign up or login flow is on a modal sheet. Yours might not be on a modal sheet. They've started here by saying login and get started. And then when you click on login, you've got multiple options. They have not put all the options right up front. They've created a modal. And then when you start, your whole modal experience starts where you fill up everything on a modal sheet. And then it explains you the sort of features, right? And productivity apps are not really that complex. So even if you look at the copy, it's uploading pictures and commenting on events, not a big deal. Multiple calendars, not something, that people will, be confused about. And importing, your OS calendar. If you're using iPhone, iOS calendar, if you're using Android, you're bringing in your Google Calendar. So there's not really something that people really care. But they could have skipped the skip button, right? Maybe they want people to actually go through the onboarding flow and read it because they want people to feel like, hey, I think you should really look at all the features that we offer and then get into the app, right? Now, maybe that's what they want to do over here, right? We don't really know the logic. But so think about your app. Do you feel you want to educate the user about the features, right? Having a skip button is not really a bad thing, right? You may or may not. In this case, they could have had a skip button, nothing wrong, right? But let's try to find some logic whether or not it's right or wrong. Over here, so they've got multiple illustrations, multiple screens, and then they've got a CTA which is pretty much continue. So pretty much that these two things sort of belong to the same pattern, right? Because it's a modal, you've got a button to continue, and this is a modal, you've got a button sort of to continue, right? And let's come to this one, right? Here, things change a little bit different, right? You've got a logo, right? You've got UI illustrations. The way they present is not always these character illustrations that we sort of see over here. This is not the only way to present. There are so many different ways to do it, right? And this is a clear example. You're using these UI elements, right? And then here you've got two buttons. You've got a create account and you've got a sign in, which is very different from done, right? They're combining the onboarding and the login screen. Here, the login screen comes after the onboarding, right? So which one do you want to prefer? Which one makes sense for your app, right? And this also has a logo. So they're using some sort of branding. Now, there's no logic for using a logo and not using a logo. It's a personal choice. It's a personal preference if you feel it's important to have the logo. And ideally, logos are there on the login screens, right? And since this is sort of like a login screen where you can sign up and log in, people usually do have the logo on that screen. Now, the other thing to note here is that this button, which is the primary, is to create an account, which is as good as signing up. You're creating a new account. And signing in, which is basically login to an existing account, is usually a secondary action. It's not the primary action. And we're going to observe this pattern. So just keep a note of this, right? Let's come over here again. Now these guys have, I don't know, I think this is Evernote. They've done a very different thing. They've used tabs, right? And then they've got one CTA that says, create to continue. And they don't even have a skip button because maybe Evernote has a lot of features that people want them to be educated about. Like, hey, look at all the features. It's important for you. Please do check it out. And it's designed in such a way that I don't really have to read any text. If I just look at the UI, I know what it is. Okay, to do. Okay, it's a list of things to do. Meeting. Okay, I can schedule meeting. Ideas. Okay, I can jot down some stuff. Blank. Okay, it's an open piece of paper where I can write down whatever I want. Right? People sort of understand it. Let's look at Netflix. Right? So Netflix, they use some illustrations. They have a little bit of text. All right. And then they've used a logo here. Now, if you look at the patterns, right, on the login screen, like wherever you have to log in or create an account, there is a logo, right? And even on this screen, it was to create an account and sign in, you see a logo, right? Now coming on to this one, Headspace. This screen, you can sign up or log in, they've got a logo. So we are discovering a few patterns over here, right? Now, if you just looked at one or two apps, you might not even find it. But when you looked at so many apps, you can see, okay, on login screens, they have a logo. That's apparently that's a standard thing, right? And over here, they're not using any illustrations. Like these are fine, but they're not using any illustration which is dedicated sort of for that particular, feature, whatever, right? It's sort of a generic thing. Maybe you can go in that direction, right? Let's go a little bit more detail, right? Now this, which is Instagram, is exactly similar to Public. Public is this app, right? They've got some illustration, they've got some text, they've got pagination, and then they've got a button that says next or continue. The other thing to note here is that they've just got one layer of text. Here they've got a title and a description, but here is just a title, right? Here they've got a title and description, but it's pretty much the same. There's a button which says continue, and then there's a modal sheet. So you can close it off, right? This again, I think I forgot to add it over here, but pretty much there's no button here at all. Now, I'm not sure how the flow for this works, but if your app uses a similar flow, then you might think about using this. And look at the way they've presented information. It's the whole mock-up, the UI itself. This is an app called as DoorDash. It's like Swiggy for countries in abroad. And they've just used the entire mock-up to explain the feature. They're not using illustrations. They're not using images. They're just using the entire mock-up. That's another direction you can take from a visual standpoint, right? Now, this is another version, an update of DoorDash. Here, they've gone about and they've added two buttons, which is very similar to these ones, right? You've got the logo, you've got to create and assign in, but look at the presentation, right? Get started is sort of like your login and sort of like your sign up, and then login is basically like your normal login, right? And this is the login screen. So they've got the logo over here and they've combined onboarding. Now you might want to combine or you might not. If you think it makes sense to combine for your app, do it. Or if not, then don't. Nothing wrong with it. And if you go on, like we could just keep seeing a lot of stuff. Like this is Masterclass. Okay. Now here, even though this is the login screen, Masterclass does not have a logo. Now this is an exception. Could Masterclass have added their Masterclass logo on the top? Definitely they could have. right? But do they have some reason? Maybe they have some reason, but at least we know what is the normal paradigm and then what are the exceptions to that. Okay, we've got Notion over here, right? So Notion, again, very similar to all the other things that we have. So mockups, so they're using mockups again to explain. And if you see, a lot of these apps don't have a skip button. This does not have skip, 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 none of these apps have skipped, pretty much because the company or the designer wants the users to go through, check out all the features, sort of subconsciously make a note of it, so that it'll help them in the future, right? But if you feel you have too many features and you really think that, it's okay if people miss this information, then you can have a skip button, right? This is, again, what is it? I think this is Nike, right? So they've used illustrations and images. Now here, they've got login, sign up, which is join now is basically sign up, and they've got continue as guest. How do you present this? If you have 3 buttons, how do you present it? So you give a primary treatment, and then you give a secondary treatment, and you give a tertiary treatment. So once you do all this, figure out which of this makes sense for your app, for your use case. Do you have 1 small feature? Do you have 5 big features? How do you want to go about it? What do you want to educate the user about? Right? So sort of ask all these questions and then sort of make an informed decision. Now, so many things you can take inspiration from a UI standpoint as well. Like this button is edge to edge, right? This button is small, all right? This button is sort of edge to edge, but it's rectangular shape. It's not curvy like this. Here, you've got 2 buttons side by side, right? Here, you've got 1 button completely on the right, 1 button completely on the left. Okay, that's another thing you can do. On masterclass, right? You've got 1 big button on the top, and then the secondary button is sort of given a tertiary treatment. It just is like a text link, which is below the button, right? So you've got so many ideas over here. Now, sometimes for stuff like this, you might not have a logic. Maybe it just looks good. The screen looks balanced. So probably then you might want to, based on that, pick the direction, the visual direction you sort of want to go, right? Anyway, now let's move forward to another example, which is a little bit more complex, which is about, let's take an example of designing the search experience. Now, let's say you have an app and people can search for things on your phone. Search experience differs from app to app based on different needs, use cases, a lot of things, right? So I've taken a couple of apps over here. We've got Swiggy, I've got Twitter, a couple of apps over here. I've got Uber, Airbnb, and then I've got YouTube, and then come to this part a little bit later. So the first thing you want to do is understand what are the various screens that are involved in a search flow. And the only way to figure out is to open apps. Now I've done these, I've taken screenshots from my phone rather than on Mobbin because it's easy for me to pick out the flow and check out all the screens, right? Now let's take a Swiggy, for example. Now Swiggy has search in the tab, right? This is one design pattern. Uber has a search bar, does not have an icon, does not have a tab. YouTube does not have a tab or a search bar, it has an icon. Now these are 3 different patterns. Which one to pick depends on your app, your use case, and how the users use your app. And we're going to get into a couple of questions that you can sort of ask yourself to figure out which is the best pattern, right? Now, so let's quickly take a look at how tab works. So users tap on search, they get this screen where there's a lot of information that's there for them, sort of like a browsing section, right? And then you can search for something. So you tap on the button gets highlighted, and as you can see, it moves to the top, right? It gives you your recent searches. It gives you a lot of other information. And then let's say you type a dish, let's say you type paneer, right? And it gives you multiple things. It gives you dishes, it gives you names of restaurants as well. And I'll give you an example over here for donuts. So if I type donut, I get donuts, the dish, and I get type of like the categories, the food, the names of the, the final product of the food item, which has the word donut, and the names of the restaurants. Now I might be searching for any of these, right? The app does not know what I'm searching for when I type the word donut. So presenting that information, which caters to all the user, like some people might want to search for mad over donuts. Some people just want to order donuts, or some people are actually looking for a specific item, right? Like if you go to paneer, right? Maybe I'm actually searching for, paneer butter masala, right? So the app shows that. Or maybe there's a restaurant which starts with the name paneer, or or maybe there's a category called paneer. I don't know. So then once I tap on paneer butter masala, I get a lot of different dishes from different restaurants. And you've got a filter here as well. You've got a filter here, and you've got even sub filters based on price and distance and all that stuff, right? Now, this is now on Swiggy, searching for a food item is very big, right? It's quite big. So you have to have multiple screen and a dedicated screen which sort of caters to like this and this very big need that users have, right? Let's take another example. Let's take Medium, right? So Medium again has a search bar, Skillshare has a search bar, and then Twitter has a search bar. Now here, when I tap on this, now obviously I need a search bar because I am going to search something. But also this is sort of like a browsing section, right? It's like you're going into this aisle inside a shopping mart and you don't really know what to search for. But then there's this person where you can talk and ask for something, which is as good as searching for something. But at the same time, you're sort of browsing through this. So you've got recommended things for you. You've got, different categories over here. And look at the way Twitter has done it. It's pretty much the same thing. You've got different categories over here. And these categories, again, are just presented differently, but they're pretty much the same thing. Here again, you've got multiple categories. So this is sort of like this browsing area, right? So if your app needs something which needs a search bar because this is what people are looking for, this is how people would use the app, then use a search, search tab. Sorry, not a search bar, right? Let's go to Uber. Now on Uber, pretty much my main goal is to search for a destination. That is pretty much my main thing. So there's no tab, there's no icon, right? I am very high chances I am going to search on the tab bar to search for something, right? So that's why the search bar is right over here. Let's look at Airbnb. Now Airbnb also has a search bar because the chances of people searching for a particular destination, they know where they want to go. It's very high. Like 90 people out of 100 people will know where they're going for, so they're automatically going to tap over here. But what if there are people who are just sort of browsing? So the search bar is pretty much on the top, not given a lot of focus and attention, but still there, right? And this tab is sort of like, we could say it is sort of the search bar, the search tab itself. We could say that. And if you see over here, everywhere there's if you go to the search tab, there's always a search bar, and then there is relevant content for that particular app. In this case, it is recent searches, popular items, popular cuisines, stuff like that. On Explore, you've got different categories, you've got recommended for you, stuff like that. On Twitter, you've got the trending tweets, you've got the various categories, right? So the same thing over here, if I scroll down here, I'm going to see multiple places. I'm going to see different types of houses that I can stay in. And at the same time, since search is quite important on the screen, the search is still fixed to the top. That's another thing you can think about. Do you want to fix it to the top? What do you want to do with the search bar? Does it go away? Does it stick? What does the user want to do on this screen, right? Let's go to YouTube, right? So on YouTube, let's try to understand how YouTube works. Now, the home screen is personalized to you. It will give you content that is relevant for you. Then it's going to have a lot of these other things, like polls and YouTube channels and stuff like that, right? I'm not saying that people don't use, the search. People do use the search, right? Which is why the search exists. But I'm guessing based on YouTube's data, users tend to go and post something, or they explore and discover something, or they go to their subscriptions and they just want to see the subscriptions related things, right? And also search is very simple. It's not too complicated. You can either search for a YouTube channel or a video. It's as simple as that. You don't have to present. Now, let's say if Swiggy had used search, right? There's a lot of this information, that can't be presented when I'm searching for something. It can be presented on the page like a browsing area, right? Now this screen is very similar to either of these screens, like the Explore tab itself. This is as good as the Explore tab because on Explore, I'm just browsing random things. And the same thing is happening over here, right? On Swiggy, I'm just browsing random things, right? On Twitter, on Medium, I'm just browsing random things over here, right? Some of these are personalized, some of them are not, right? So, which is why they've used an icon on the top. And when you tap on the icon, all you can do is just check your, search for the recent search query that you did. And if you probably search for, let's say Avalon Meta, you will get the YouTube channel of Avalon Meta and a couple of videos by Avalon Meta, right? If you probably search for Orphan Black Season 2 Explained, then probably means that, you're searching for a particular video, or maybe there's a YouTube channel called as Orphan Black. Don't know, right? So depending on what your users want, depending on how users use your product, you need to figure out which experience is the best for your app. Now, let's take a look at some of the questions that you can ask yourself when designing an interface. Please ask all these questions. I'm not saying these are the only questions. There might be a lot more questions, but to get you started, these are probably the high level questions. What does the user want to do on the screen? What is the intent of the user? And this is not only for search. This is for any screen on the app. What information is the user looking for? Now, the user wants to perform an action. He has a certain thing that he wants to do, and what information is he looking for, right? Now let's take an example. Now let's take Uber. What does the user want to do on the screen? What is the intent of the user? The user wants to search for a location, which is his destination. So what information is the user looking for? Basically, he's looking for a big search bar where he can tap and put his entry and type whatever he wants. What are the various actions that the user can do on the screen? So let's go to Uber, for example. So I've got a big search bar, right? Now, what are the various things I can do? I can click on an list item, which is places that I regularly go to, right? I might choose between ride, rental, or commute. These are the various actions, but which is the thing that I really users typically end up doing? And based on Uber's data, I'm guessing they need a search bar to enter a destination, which is pretty much what they always do, right? Maybe there are 3-4 places that they keep traveling to. So the Uber shows only 2 of them. So maybe the third or the fourth one, which is not there, sort of like, for example, here Starbucks, and there's this Lions Airport City Old Age Home. So maybe these are places that the person regularly goes to, right? How does the user navigate backward and forward? So user flows are a bunch of screens that are interlinked, which means you should be able to go back and go forward any point in time. If the user does not know how to navigate back or navigate forward, then there's a problem with that screen. Okay. What information needs the most attention, right? Now we can sort of do this. So if I type the word Jayanagar, right, I'm getting places. I'm getting like places as in like locations, like Starbucks coffee. I'm getting, just the general area, like Jayanagar, 4th block, 9th block. And, I've got another cafe over here. So basically the question I want to answer is, what information needs the most attention, right? Now, this might not always be the case, right? Not always something needs an attention. So here the work is something they're giving good amount of attention to. Here, I don't think they're giving any sort of attention to anything. Right. So, I mean, not all the time, you might have to answer all these questions. Sometimes the question applies, sometimes it doesn't, right? What can we do to help the user make a better decision? And the very typical example for this is on Swiggy, right? Now, let's say you search for donuts, right? And then you were like, okay, let me search what's there in Mad Over Donuts, and you go to Mad Over Donuts, and then it gives you information, right? So this information is presented, gets the most attention because it's on top. And then the reason it's getting a lot of attention is because there's this big separation which has nothing to do with Mad Over Donuts. These are like suggested results, right? So this gets a lot of attention. And here, when I'm scrolling through the dishes, right? If I go to the dishes and I scroll, I'm getting a lot of these small things where, I get 30% off. This is a recommended try, right? This is a non-vegetarian. This is a vegetarian thing, right? All of these things are helping me make better decisions, right? So if I come over here to this question, what can we do to help the user make a better decision, right? If we just gave them all the informations that are there, right? The user might not know how to compare them and make a decision, right? So which is why we're also giving them filters to help you make a better decision. And adding all these small things, providing data points that help user make decision is very important, right? So these are sort of some of the questions that you can ask yourself. You can sort of make a note of this. And the idea is to make a habit of asking these questions automatically. You don't really have to make a note of these and refer to these from your notebook every time you're designing something. Over a period of time, these should become common sense. Like before designing an interface, you should automatically start asking these questions in your brain, figure out the answer, and then start designing the UI. right? So this entire video is about design, is about discovering design patterns. Now I've just done for 2, but if you go and let's say we go to, let's go back, let's go to, let's go to patterns, right? There are so many user flows that are there, literally so many of user flows, right? How do you design a pricing page? How do you design cart and checkout order, right? How do you design a reviews and rating system? This is very interesting, reviews and rating system, right? How do you design loading screens? So many different ways of doing it. Which one do you know is the right way? Do a comparative analysis, take screenshots, analyze them, see which works the best for your app, for your use case, for your user, right? Think about that, right? And you've also got different elements, right? Now, the best part about elements is that this is pure visuals, right? If how do you, if you want to design, let's say buttons, all right? Or let's take text fields, for example. Let's say you want to design text fields. How do you know what are the different types of text fields, right? If you look over here, in this text field, there isn't really anything, there's no box or anything. It's just there, right? Here you've got like this rectangular rounded text field, right? Here you've just got a blank area. Right here you've got like this, it's a tall one, but I think it's around 4 pixel radius, and then the label is inside the button, is inside the input field, right? So many things that you can do. Let's go check out a few more, right? We need different apps, right? Again, so here it's like a line, right? It's not really an input field, it's just a single line, right? And what else? Let's just go and try to find a few more things, right? So here, if you look at these, the ones that we saw had stroke, but these don't have stroke. They just have like a solid background. That's another visual way of designing, an input text field. So here again, you've got lines. Here is a different one. You've got like a background color, and then you've got a stroke. It's a different thing. Now, sometimes for these, and look at this. This is pretty cool. You've got the label on the left, and it's not really like a box. It's like an edge-to-edge list item. This is another way you can do. Now, how do you know which one? Sometimes you might not be able to provide a very good logic to it. Maybe it just depends on the visual direction that you're going for, right? And with that should be more than enough to sort of give you like a direction, right? So do all this analysis, figure out the patterns, and then apply it to your design, right? So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, and I'll leave the link to this Figma file down in the Loom video description, so you can come and check it out if you guys want it. If you have any questions, hit me up on Discord, and I'll see you guys in another video.